Hi there. Here's a quick demonstration of the LifePad iCaster application for iPad and NewTek TriCaster Advanced Edition. So the iCaster application runs on your iPad and you launch it, and the first thing you need to do is go to the settings window and set the IP address of your TriCaster. Then what you can do is there are 8 zones in the iCaster application, and these can be broken down into image zones like a multi-viewer, or you can turn a zone into an array of buttons for triggering macros and other functions within iCaster that control the TriCaster. And what we've basically got here is zone 1, top left, is set to a video stream, as you can see below, and we've chosen the TriCaster output number 2, which is set to preview at the moment, and we can also choose the quality that we want. Similarly, zone 2 is set to video, and that's on output 1, which is the program feed. And I think we've got zone 5 on, as actually showing the DDR content itself in zone 5. Zone 4 is showing DDR1, so DDR1 and DDR2 on 4 and 5. And then in 3 we've got some buttons, and 6, 7 and 8 we've also got buttons. Now in the buttons, we basically can choose from one giant button for the whole zone, or we can do 2x2, 3x2 or 4x3 buttons, and that gives us individual functions on lots of buttons, and you can basically arrange them however you want. And that's basically what you do within this window. So you set what the zones mean, whether they're video, and you choose the video streaming quality, or whether you want buttons. And then we actually allocate functions to the buttons in the main interface. Also, if you're creating or saving settings, you can basically click the FTP server button, and what it'll let you do is connect to the iCaster app through FTP, and that'll let you upload and download configurations. So once you're done, you can export your configuration through the FTP server, and similarly you can transfer that to other iCaster applications also through the FTP server. Once you're done with your setup of these zones, you end up with something perhaps a little bit like this, where we've got video content and also some buttons. And what we've done is we've actually allocated essentially functions to switch on these buttons. This is a common way you might use it, although this is certainly not the only thing it's designed to do. So what we can do is I've got the DDR1 and the DDR2 buttons here, which I'm pressing. And this is basically setting DDR1 or DDR2 to preview. Or we can set, we could set it to program. They're not programmed at the moment, but basically DDR1 and DDR2 to preview is what we've got on these buttons here. Similarly, we can choose camera 1, and you'll see on the TriCaster window that we're switching the preview bus here. Okay. Now, if you want to edit what the buttons do, all you basically do is you click and hold. So if I click and hold, press and hold on DDR1, it will pop up a window that shows me what that button is doing. Now, there's several different ways to program the buttons. One of the easiest ways, probably the simplest way, is to call a macro name. So if in your TriCaster you've created a macro, so for example we've got, if we configure the macros here in our TriCaster, we can basically, all of these macros are by name, so system macros, session-specific macros, and so on. So any of these macros, for example, DSK1 : perform take, you could actually type that information directly into the text here. If we chose a macro name and we wanted to type that text literally, DSK1 : perform take, into here, that would basically assign a macro or trigger a macro from the TriCaster, from the iCaster panel. Alternatively, what you can do is you can use a macro string, and this is effectively the same as if you were to edit the macro in your TriCaster. So for example, this one here, if we edit this, we will actually see that it's got syntax, which is the TriCaster syntax, so main DSK2 auto and value is false. Now that syntax is documented by NewTek, and you can actually make your own explicit macros using macro strings, and it's driving the TriCaster directly with the TriCaster macro language. The nice thing about this is it doesn't depend on having specific macros in the TriCaster, so you can take your iCaster application to any TriCaster and control it directly without having to have the macros already loaded onto the TriCaster. So that's the benefit of the macro string. It's a bit more complicated to set up, but it does give you a control system that's completely independent of whether or not the macros are loaded on the TriCaster. So macro name is the easy way to do it. Just trigger the macros by name that already exist in the TriCaster. Macro string allows you to program it explicitly using the TriCaster macro language. You can also control the color of the button as well, so that you can lay out things nicely. You can also use, I'll get onto it in a moment, but basically there are multiple layouts on the iCaster for different screens of buttons and so on. And you can actually use a button to switch between layouts as well. And in this case, you'd actually type the name of the layout in the layout name. Or you can have a blank button that doesn't do anything. So in this case, we've got a macro string. And that's basically how you do it. So you either choose a video feed for each of the panels, or you program either a macro name or a macro string or a layout switch to each of the buttons. And as I mentioned earlier, we have got multiple layouts. So we can bring up this layout menu, and it'll allow you to switch between layouts, and you can rename them and delete them and so on. And it will actually switch between a different layout. We can go back to the other one. And if you remember from earlier, you can even make a button on your screen that would switch layouts. So if we just try programming that now, default is the other layout. So why don't we go in here? Why don't we make this button here switch to the default layout? So we'll go switch layout. We're going to call it default. Well, or switch. We'll just call it switch. And the layout name that we want to call it is default. So we'll type that in here. Okay, in theory, and we'll make that a blue button. So we're done with that. Okay, and if we switch that, it switches to the other layout. So that's basically pretty much what iCaster does. It's very flexible. It requires a little bit of effort on your part to create your own layouts, but it's very powerful and will allow you to basically control anything that can be macro scripted in the TriCaster can be controlled by iCaster. And of course, you've got these great low latency streaming multi-viewer windows as well. If you've got any questions, go to livepad.co.uk and find more information, or you can get more general information about NDI and other compatible applications at sienna.tv, sienna.tv. Thanks.